Hi ladies, this is Jackie Hammock. I'm a discussion group leader at Lily Moms, and I wanted to talk to you ladies a little bit about something that God has laid on my heart. Um, something that I'm learning over and over again this year is that I am not in control of my world. I am a person who likes to plan ahead and to have a plan and to have everything laid out. In fact, when my husband and I go home for Christmas to Virginia, we spend the entire drive home, which is about 4.5 hours, not the entire ride home, but most of it, actually making our calendar for the following year. And I'm saying, like, we plan out, you know, vacations home, vacations to go camping, times we're going to get together with family, and we'll literally like be texting people and say like, hey, are you guys available at like the first weekend of October for whatever, and like we'll have a plan in place of what we're going to do the following year so that Russell can request his time off. And it's kind of been a tradition for the last 3 or 4 years, and so this year, as usual, start of the year, we're driving home back to Wake Forest and made our plans, and I'd have to say probably 95% of what we planned never happened. um, Another thing that I like to do is I have, a daily schedule for things like I do laundry every Tuesday. It's gotten to the point where if I tell the girls to get their dirty clothes together on a different day, or I start running the washing machine on a different day, they're like, Mom, what are you doing? What? It's not Tuesday. And they don't understand that the washing machine actually works other days of the week besides Tuesday. I always go grocery shopping on Thursdays. So my friends that know me know when I'm, on Tuesday, I'm not going to go out with them because it's laundry day, or Thursday mornings have always traditionally been grocery shopping morning. But with COVID and with everything that's happened this year, I've had to really let go of a lot of these things. I still do laundry on Tuesdays, but um, I've had to let go of kind of my perceived plan for things and my expectations for life have been just rocked this year. Um, but I take assurance in the fact that even though this was a surprise to me, this was a surprise to my family, this was a surprise, I think, to all of us, that this was not a surprise to God. And He ultimately has, His glory in mind through all of this. So I just want to share a verse with you that really speaks to my heart. It's from Jeremiah 10:23. I'm reading it from a napkin because I'm fancy like that. But the ESV version of the Bible says it like this: I know, O Lord, that the way of man is not in himself, that it is not man who walks to direct his steps. And that really encourages me because I know that um, even if my plan doesn't end up being what happens, God is directing my steps, and He's ultimately going to make things work together for my good and His glory. I also really enjoyed the Message version of this particular verse. Just puts it in kind of more um, real terms, but it says, I know, God, that mere mortals can't run their own lives, that men and women don't have what it takes to take charge of life. So correct us, God, as you see best. So I'm trying my very best to live in this time of uncertainty and fear and doubt, just fully trusting in God's plan for me and for my family. I think it's teaching me to just let go of things that I used to hold so tightly to, and realize that I can have joy even in the unknown, and in these unprecedented times. So ladies, thank you for listening, and I hope to see you all in person very soon. Bye.
So we are super lucky this year to have 4 amazing mentor moms whose sole goal and purpose at Lily Moms is just to share love, encouragement, support, answer questions, chat with us, help us, pray with us, meet with us, whatever it is that you need, that's what they are here for. And so I wanted to give them a chance just to share a little bit of their heart. And so all of them are our speaker today. So you get to learn just a little bit more about who they are and some of the things that they've learned along the way, some of the wisdom they have to share. So I would encourage you to get to know these ladies. And they will be sort of rotating through the different groups, so you should get to interact with just about all of them at some point. And if not, catch them at a mom's night out, or send them an email or a message and just tell them like you would love to get coffee, or come over while they fold their laundry, or have them come over while you fold your laundry, and just sit and learn and chat and listen. And they have lots of great wisdom to share. So I encourage you to get to know them and enjoy as we get to hear a little bit about their life.
I'm Michelle Wilson. I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, and I was a nurse before I was a mom. I did not grow up in the church. I did not grow up in a believing family. I grew up in a lot of chaos, a lot of abuse and addiction. So I'm not the stereotypical church lady, which I think is beneficial to me in a lot of areas. And I've been married to Greg for 19 years. We lived in Austin for 6 years before we moved here. We've been here for 13 years. And that's me.
Good, I'm Blair Savage. So we're not answering questions. I'm Blair Savage, and I grew up in Charleston, West Virginia, not South Carolina, clarify. In the mountains in West Virginia. I have a family of 5. I have 2 sisters. Grew up in a family that we attended church. We absolutely went to church, for sure we did. But I did not come to know Jesus as my Savior, or really know what it meant to be a child of God until I left home. And my parents, I did have a good example of growing up in a family where my parents loved one another and loved us dearly. They were always present and they were in. But I did not necessarily have an example of parenting in a manner of really leaning on the Lord to do that. But I have 4 kids, and 3 are in college and 1 is in high school. And we've lived here for 23 years, and that's it.
It's hard to know where to start or stop. But I'm Penny Keithley, and I've been a mentor mom. I think this is my 5th year. I grew up in Missouri, and into a family that of Christians, Baptists. My daddy became a pastor when I was about 8 years old, about the same time I came to Christ. And I also married a man who had surrendered to ministry, and eventually we planted a church together in Missouri, and eventually we came to seminary and did all of that. I had 2 children and 4 grandchildren. And my family was, even though my daddy was a pastor, my mama was a nurse, and I have a brother and sister. We were in a very legalistic situation in our church, which caused a lot of miscommunication and wrong thinking for me that took a lot of time to get over. As I grew up and grew out and got on my own, I was thankful that my husband was not in that same. He got saved later in life, and so he was able to help me through a lot of that. But what else do I need to say? Boy, it's hard to end. That was not a good ending place. I'm trying to think. I want to end on a higher level than that. Let's see, I have been an administrative assistant most of my life, And so I enjoyed working a lot, worked very hard when I was a young mom, and then thankfully got to quit eventually and enjoy being a mom on my own, so. Sandy.
I'm Sandy Welch, and I grew up in a Christian home. But like Penny, it was very legalistic, and I really didn't have a good example of parenting, like how to parent. In the Christian sense, my father was very depressed and a very angry man until close to the time that I left home. So I was not saved until I was in my early 20s, and I married my husband when I was 25. He was called to preach, and so he ended up pastoring a church for 10 years, and him as my pastor is where I really came out of the legalism and learned about how God loved me just because he created me. And so he pastored for 10 years, and then we moved here. He pastored in Texas, so we've been here for, it's just been 7 years. We've been married for 21 years, and we have 3 kids. My oldest is 20. I have a 17-year-old who's a senior, and then a 16-year-old.
Best mothering advice. Probably from my sister-in-law, who told me I had so many voices telling me what I should and shouldn't do as a mother, and we weren't close to any family geographically when we had little babies. And I was still working pretty much full time and just stressing about all the decisions. And my sister-in-law said, you know what, you get to make the decisions, you're the mom, and no one else gets an opinion or gets to give their 2 cents to that. And it was very freeing to be like, oh wait, I am the mom. No one else, it doesn't matter, they don't have to live with this baby, I do. So I've got to do what works best for us in order to survive. And that was very freeing for me. And probably, but I don't know that I have a super bad worst advice. I think I just had so many voices. I think one of the things that stuck out the most was that I had somebody tell me that if I would just leave my kids in their crib long enough, they would cry it out. And neither one of my kids were crying out kids. They would just get louder and louder and more angry. So it was just so, I didn't understand the point of crying out if they'd been crying for 30 minutes. And so it was very freeing to me to be like, no, I can pick up my baby. I can hold my baby as much as I want to, because I'm the one that has to live with this baby. And I knew one day they were going to get too big to sit in my lap anymore, and so I did treasure those moments and just kind of ignored the people that said to cry it out. That's not what my kids were. They were not going to do that. So
I think I'm going to start with worst.
okay.
I think the worst message was that you had to breastfeed. I guess in my ignorance at the first, I just thought that breastfeeding, like the baby during delivery, the Lord delivers it, it comes. I thought breastfeeding would happen in the same way. It just happened.
Yes.
You know, there was no discussion about all the amalgamations of things that come with breastfeeding if in fact it doesn't work out well hormonally for you. And so the message I heard was, you really have to breastfeed.
Yes.
That's the best for your child. And if you don't, you really aren't doing the best for your child.
Yes.
That's not what a first time, second, third, or fourth time mom needs to hear. And so I would just say the worst thing was to say you have to do this. There are good and better things for lots of choices, but there are so many choices. Formula feeding's lovely. It's great. It's good for your marriage because of a lot of reasons. You can share in that, and you're not grumpy because you're not bleeding from all parts, and it's just a lovely thing. So I would just say the worst would be that, and ignore that. It's, you know, you have choices and the Lord will lead you. And then that actually leads me to the best. The best advice was a sweet, sweet woman who said, when I was in tears, which I was often over, you know, do you pop, do you not pop? What, you know, so many ignorances and decisions to be made, and just that still the voice of of align your heart with the Lord. And even though you're sleepless, even if you get the slightest bit of truth and communion with the Lord for the 10 minutes that you can stay awake, if you commune with God in that time, even if it's just that simple plea of, Lord, I have no clue, He will show up, and the child will survive when you make the wrong decision, and you'll learn from it. And I think ultimately the best thing was learning to depend 100% on the Lord during those little years, because that dependence, that succumbing to your ignorance and your dependence on Him then, it's what you must have when your kids get older. So that would be my best, is really the Lord.
I don't think I received a whole lot of advice when my kids were little, and I was just thinking about that this morning, that I think the reason for that is I wasn't willing probably or open to reception of advice for a long time. I think when I was first married and first a mom, I had a lot of my own opinions, and I grew up in it because of the legalism. I grew up in a place where you pretty much kept things close to your vest because you didn't want to get in trouble or be denounced as someone who thought the wrong thing. So I was probably most concerned of what people were going to say about me, you know, because I was a protection of myself. So I didn't want them to know what I did, and I didn't want them to, you know. So, but somewhere along the way, I feel like I did a lot of reading, and I still advise. I think, you know, you don't have to believe everything you read, and you don't have to do everything you read, but I think it's good to get a lot of information. I did do that. But along the way, I think my husband and an evangelist gave me the best advice. So I think finding balance was really important for me, because I was a hard worker. I was a person who took a lot of value in what I did. So I was very scared of motherhood because I didn't know if I could do it. When Matt was born, and I fell in love with him, and just, you know, found it wonderful to be a mom to him. I got more comfortable, obviously, but I got so zeroed into him. I'm OCD anyway, and so I was just everything was about him. And at one point, Ken said, "You know, I'm still here." Yeah. And I know I feel like you love Matt more than you love me now. And I started to realize that I had kind of dropped Ken off the back end, and now I was totally on Matt. And I feel like it is something you have to learn as a young mom, to learn to balance and give your kids space, and remember that you do have a husband, and that it's important to have those date nights and show him some attention. You wouldn't have this baby if you didn't have him, that kind of thing. So learning to balance has always been a big thing in my life. Balancing my responsibilities, balancing what I should do and not do, and all the balancing. And then I heard a preacher once say, I think when my kids were elementary school age, that as a mom or as a parent, I don't remember if he said mom or parent, I took it just personally, that you are the biggest influence in your child's life. You are the person who cares the most for that child. And if you don't pray, if you aren't where you need to be with the Lord and taking that child to the Lord every day, who's going to? So I started to realize that was my most important job in momming, is to make sure that I was where I needed to be with the Lord and to take that child every day. Because my first lesson that I learned was that I can't control everything. As an ODCD person, you know, when my girl got pneumonia when my son, you know, made bad decisions, I realized I can't control everything that this child does. Oh my goodness. He's gonna fall off the steps and break his neck. He's gonna, you know, then I should go, okay, I can't control everything. I really do have to pray and put them in the Lord's hands. So my two big lessons.
Well, I actually didn't have really any good or bad advice either. And I think it's because when my husband first started pastoring, we had moved to a new church, and both of my two youngest were born at that church. So I had left all my friends people that I had known, and my parents had moved to Ohio from Texas, so my mom wasn't close in vicinity, and I didn't know the women at the church my husband was pastoring really well, so I wasn't really receptive to any advice, that they might have given me. But one thing that I did, like being saved in my early 20s, I developed a very strong prayer life at that time. And that kind of bled over into being a new mother. And it's just something that, like, I didn't have my mom close. I had moved away from the people that like my friends that I'd grown up with. And so I really kind of felt on my own. And my husband was pastoring and working a full-time job. So he wasn't around a lot. So I'm leaning on God that that's what I had and that's what I did. Just a lot of prayer. And I'm thankful for that because it has carried me through. Like, I have a 20-year-old now. It's carried me through, and I've seen how it's been so beneficial and how God has used that to speak to me and to talk to me and show me things I was doing wrong and needed to change. And so I think if I was giving a new mom or a young mom the best advice I could, I would say start with prayer.
And it doesn't have to be quiet. It's not going to be quiet.
Right.
No.
Let's just say, it's not going to be quiet.
You're not gonna have an hour out by yourself somewhere. No.
I think also you have that expectation, because my time with the Lord would be in a chair, and there were 4 people being very loud, and I would say, if someone is bleeding, you can interrupt me, but if not, you do whatever. The door would be closed, so there would be security of flight, but I secured my thoughts with the Lord in the midst of Legos flying and people crying.
Yes.
Yes.
And that is something the Lord will foster, but you've got to dedicate yourself to sit in the chair,
Yes.
and get that boundary of y'all can be right there, and just know it's not going to be quiet.
It's not pretty. It's not Instagram worthy.
No, it's
No.
not. It's not, and it's not what you knew before kids.
Mm-hmm.
But the Lord is louder than that.
Mm-hmm. It's not about perfection. It's just progress.
That's
It's sanctification is
Mhm.
progress.
Yeah.
And your quiet time will look different when you have newborns versus when you have toddlers and versus when you have, elementary age kids. It's all gonna look different, but it doesn't have to be. God does not have a timetable. He doesn't have a time clock in heaven where he's punching you in and out for when you're praying to make sure you get your 60 minutes in. It's whatever you can do. It's not, if it's 10 minutes, if it's 5, if it's literally while you're changing a poopy diaper, you have 60 seconds right then to pray for that child as you're wiping that baby and move on. It's not, that's so good, because I think we get stuck in the trap of it has to look like this, but it
not
just
going to.
doesn't. It's not even going to.
No,
It's not even.
it's not going to after they finish with the Legos.
Yeah, it's not.
It'll be something else.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of attuning our minds right.
It
'Cause
is.
Yes.
I know that we
Yes.
have to train our minds to go to the right place, to go
Right.
with the Lord.
Yes.
Whether you're just praying as you walk out the door, praying
Yes.
as right before your child is just, done whatever.
Yeah.
You're praying as you go to deal with it.
Yes.
Lord, help me. I don't know what to do with this.
Yes. Absolutely.
It is that tuning your heart to seek
Yeah.
the Lord.
Right.
I'd say don't compare.
Mhm.
Don't compare your husband to someone else's husband. Don't compare your children to other children. Don't compare yourself to other moms. Because we're all different and we've all been given different gifts. We're all in different seasons. And I really believe that comparison is a tool of the devil to create division in moms. To prevent
And discourage.
authentic, yes, to prevent authentic, genuine, sincere relationships, which is what we were created to do, is have genuine relationship. I just think it's just the worst thing ever. You can't, every one of us is created individually and differently, and in all the history of the world, there is no other Blair Savage, ever. And so why should I'm never gonna be Blair Savage. And I'm never gonna be Penny Keithley or Sandy. And so there's no reason for me to compare myself to them. What I need to be looking at is comparing my heart to the heart of Christ. Period. That's the only standard. So don't compare yourself. Don't compare your children, because everyone develops differently.
We can learn from each other.
Absolutely.
We can get great hints, but we don't
Absolutely.
need to compare.
Yeah.
And I would also say, just enjoy your children.
Yes.
I think that I struggled with that sometimes because I felt there were so many things I had to
Mhm.
live up to.
Yes.
And now my children are in their 30s, and what's most precious to me is that we have a good relationship.
Yeah.
That we love each other.
Yeah.
We don't think the same, they're not little mini-me's of me.
Right.
They're individuals and they think differently than I do on a lot of things, but we call each other, we talk to each other,
Yes.
we appreciate each other. And if you don't have that, when you get to that point, and that's what you build when
Right.
they're little babies. You
Right.
build your relationship with the Lord, your relationship with your husband, and your
Mm-hmm.
relationship with your children. What everybody else is doing
It's irrelevant.
it's right.
It's irrelevant.
You need to have that.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. And really, it's the motherhood's the only job that your measure of success is that you've worked yourself out of a job.
Exactly.
You know, you've raised, responsible, adults who are independent. We can't control their faith. And that's a hard thing to remember when you have teenagers, like you were saying. When they're little, you can control a lot. But once they get older, you can't. You can't control. And what we can do that is most effective is to bring them to the Lord in prayer. Because we can't control them. We can't control their hearts. It's just impossible.
You're not gonna beat your children into some
No.
kind of relationship
Yes.
with you. I just don't think, I think that we need to remember that we say, I love you, morning, noon, and night.
Yes.
We show that by the way
Yes.
we treat them with respect as we
Yes.
want to treat others,
Yes.
by living what we say we believe.
Uh-huh. Something we tell
They catch more by what they
Yes.
see than what they hear sometimes.
We
but-
tell our kids often, and we started, I think, probably when they were little elementary school, or maybe even preschool, was that we would say on a regular basis, there's nothing that you are ever going to do or say, no mistake you're ever going to make, that is going to stop us from loving you. We will always be in your corner. We will always be your biggest cheerleaders. We will always be here for us. There's nothing you can do that will stop our love. And just reminding them of that, we are your safe place. We are your haven. We are your sanctuary while you're here. So just a good reminder, because I know a lot of people that grew up in legalism, and we did too. It was just a very worldly legalism. Inside these four walls, everyone's falling apart. But once we leave this door, everyone needs to look perfect. And just reminding your kids that you're okay with their mess. We're all a mess. It's fine. Nobody's perfect, and perfection is not our standard.
I would absolutely agree with what you both just said. And I, as an almost 47-year-old woman, do not have a close relationship with either of my parents. And that stems from really never being able to do anything right. Like my choices, even at the age I am now, being judged. The church I go to, it doesn't say Baptist in the name, and yeah, that's a recent thing for me. Anyway, but I mean, as old as I am, I'm still dealing with that. And so I decided a long time ago that I was not going to repeat that. That was not going to be the way that my family was. And if anything, the sin that I see in my children and dealing with that and helping them to, take that to Jesus and to lay that down, that keeps me in check, seeing I may be a parent, but I still need Jesus in a really big way. And my parents were not like that. They are not like that. So that's been, and I think a lot of times when we grow up in situations like that, we come to a point where we have a choice. We can repeat what happened, or we make the decision to make a change.
Yes.
And so that's what I did. And it hasn't been easy, but I know it's definitely been worth it, because that's what I want when my kids are, they're all still at home. But when they are gone, I want that relationship with them where they call me about anything and they know that their mess is safe with me. So.
Any closing thoughts? I'll cut it off. All right.
Yay, we got it done.
That's a wrap.